I'm attorney Phil Jusino, and this is the Phil Jusino Show, coming at you from Strathmore Studios. This show is brought to you by Big Belly Barbecue, the best barbecue in Smithtown. Before I introduce my guest, I want to borrow a line from a great book called Animal Farm by George Orwell. And in that, he said, all the animals were created equal, but some were more equal than others. Well, on the Phil Jusino Show, all my guests are special. But tonight, I have a guest that's more special than all of them simply because he's my dad. Dad, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Phil.
I had asked my dad to write a couple of bullet points to give me a little bit of information. I know a lot about his life, and he gave me a legal brief. Also, on the way here, this show almost didn't take place. My dad's agent contacted me on my way here, and he wanted more money for the show, and I said, we don't pay our guests. And lastly, before the show started, my dad took out his little brush and he brushed his hair. And I'm a little jealous because I didn't ever have to worry about that. Well, years. But I have my dad. It's going to be a great show. We're going to get a look at his life, an amazing life from coming to New York when he was about 7 from Puerto Rico, seeing big buildings for the first time, his time as a paratrooper, 101st Airborne Division. And I think we're going to get an answer because you said you took the train to Clarksville to go to Fort Campbell. So we're going to find out if that was the last train to Clarksville. That's a joke. Some people might not get my humor. But let's begin. Without any further ado, let's begin. Dad, welcome aboard. Now, when I first mentioned to you to be on my show, you looked at me like, well, I'm not so sure about this. You weren't really sure. Can we fill an hour? And then after you gave me the notes, I think we need like a four-part series. But let's get right into it. You came here to, I say America, but from Puerto Rico, a Commonwealth, when you were about 7 years old. And just briefly describe the town, Ensenada, the town you came from in Puerto Rico.
Okay, the town I lived in was a town called Ensenada, which is the equivalent of about a suburb from the main municipality called Guanica, which is on the southwest part of the island of Puerto Rico.
And a small town by most standards?
My town, it was a small suburb. For example, where I live now on Moorwood Drive, you had my house was up on a slight slope, had houses on both sides of the road, and the houses were, typical one-story houses.
And you had said, other than the mill, which is the mill in your town, all the buildings were one story.
Correct.
Right. So your dad comes here ahead of time and saves some money, and then he brings the family, correct?
Right.
So you didn't see your dad for a period of time.
It was about a year.
Okay.
Maybe a little more.
And you came here with your mom, and you have 4 brothers and sisters, so there are 5 kids.
Brother and 3 girls. My 3 sisters.
Right.
Yeah.
So 5 of you, 5 kids, come here, and you told me on the ride here, which I thought was interesting. You said that when you got out of Penn Station, because you flew to Miami,
right,
and then you ended up coming to New York
by train,
and you got out. I think you said your Uncle Tony picked you up,
right,
and you see New York for the first time. What is your impression?
I was mesmerized. I had never seen anything above a one-story house. The tallest building I had ever seen before then was the
mill?
Sugar mill, which had a big stack, and the stack must have been about, maybe 3-4 stories.
Right. So when you came to America, you knew a little English, but you weren't fluent in it.
No, exactly. My grandfather had worked for a very wealthy family, and they traveled, and he traveled along with them. He was like, I guess, a butler, a valet to them. And so he had traveled pretty much the world. I know for a fact he was in Europe and uh, New York, the U.S., of course, and so he knew English. He was fluent in English
Okay.
because he had to deal with the family.
Now, was your mother fluent in English when she came here?
My mother knew quite a bit.
Okay.
She had picked it up from her father. My mother was a very quick learner. My mother. Uh,
And she made great Spanish rice. That's why I used to go
oh
there.
yeah,
We'll get to that later.
yeah.
All right. So your uncle picks you up. You go in. Now, obviously, it's an adjustment for you to make. Now you're in
Yeah.
the city.
Right.
What part of the was it Manhattan or what part of
Okay.
the city did you live in?
When I first arrived here, we stayed with my uncle Tony, Tony Cirillo, who had been
That sounds
here.
Italian.
Yeah, Tony Cirillo, and he had been here for a couple of years. So when we come in, he let us stay at his place, which, by the way, was in Washington Heights.
Okay.
Yeah, 135th, and I remember that. But
So then you go to school, and back then they didn't have these inclusion classes. So you were
right,
just put into a regular. Was it first
right.
grade or second grade? Second grade.
No, I entered the first grade, and it was at PS 107 on 106th Street in Manhattan.
And you told me the first English word or a word of English that you learned that you didn't know in that class, when the teacher said something and a student that was bilingual told you what it was. Tell us
Right.
briefly
Yeah,
about
this
that.
was at the beginning of the school year, and the teacher, when she came in, had opened her a little closet where she would put her coat, and she noticed that the mirror was broken. So then she asked the class if anyone at home had a spare mirror to bring it in.
And it was espejo, she said.
Yes,
Well, no,
and
she didn't say
yeah,
espejo, but
so
she said mirror.
right, I asked the kid next to me who was very, fluent in English, what is she talking about? So he told me, and she's looking for a mirror. And I said, mirror?
Hmm.
What's a mirror? Then he told me the word espejo. Then I understood.
Good.
So in my mind, going back, that was the first word in English that
You
I
learned here.
remember.
Okay.
I'm
Now,
familiar
just for
with.
my viewing audience, you came here in 1945.
Hmm.
So the war had just ended.
Actually, the war had not ended. It was a few months after I got
Okay.
here that the war ended, and I remember that very vividly because I lived in. It was a tenement, high rise, 5 stories. I lived on the fifth floor, and it was the apartment went from the street side to the backyard side, and everybody was out the front windows banging pots and making all kinds of noises
Hmm.
when the word came out that the war was over.
Okay. Good. So when you first came here, was it with a wave? I'm going to be looking at any questions we have. Ed Vilbig's watching. Ray Morrow,
Oh
Leanne
yeah.
Wilkie. We all know those people very well. Uh, Kelly and 13 others. Now, when you came here, like like on mom's side, the Italian side, the Italians came over, and there was a wave of Italians coming over.
Hmm.
When you came over from Puerto Rico, were there a lot of other Puerto Ricans
Yeah.
coming at
Yeah,
that
there
time?
was
A wave?
yeah, at that time there was quite a wave of people coming over.
Now, how were you treated by the Americans or the New Yorkers, let's say? Because I always,
Hmm.
obviously, Puerto Rico, again, is a commonwealth, so it's part of America, but was a different world back then.
Right.
So when you came here, how did the New Yorkers treat you?
Uh, as far I was always treated very well, primarily because I learned the language very quickly.
You assimilated.
Within the first grade, yeah, within the first grade, I by the end of the first grade, I was speaking English, and thereafter, I always used English. The only time I spoke Spanish was at home with my mother and father.
Okay. And, it's amazing. I know you were 7, but some people come here even at a young age and have an accent. You have no Spanish accent. But when you speak the language, you speak it like just any other
Right,
person
right,
speaking
right,
Spanish.
right. And like I said, I think that might have been because my ear was tuned to the English language from my grandfather.
Okay, so you had heard. It wasn't that
It
foreign to
wasn't
you.
the language itself, the sound of it wasn't
Right.
foreign.
Right. Now, growing up, um, I remember you telling me the first time you actually had seen football. You didn't even know what it was.
Oh, yes.
How old?
Yes.
That's an interesting story. I
Oh,
want to talk
gosh.
about
Yeah,
that.
my God. I thought you had forgotten that.
I didn't forget.
Yeah. I remember it was a winter day, and I lived on 106th Street and between Park and Madison Avenues. Central Park was only a block and a half away. So this was a weekend. I think it was a Saturday, and I uh, got out early. By early, I mean sometime around 9 o'clock ish, 10 o'clock or something like that. Before noon. Anyway, so I go to the park, and I walk down. The familiar area was going to the ball fields. Where I play baseball.
Right.
And as I'm walking down, I see a group of people, guys running around and so
And you
on.
had never seen
And
football.
I had never seen a game of football.
How old were you?
Uh, I guess since I was out alone, I must have been maybe around 10.
Okay, so this was about 1947.
That's about
And
1947.
what
Yeah.
I find amazing is 1955. You
Mhm.
played College Point AC on a football team with Junie Myers and a bunch of other people. You were number
Right,
70.
right,
You won the championship
right.
and you went
Undefeated.
undefeated. And I have the jacket, which is amazing to me. So 47, you didn't even know what football was.
Nope.
And then here you are, 8 years later,
Hmm.
playing football. You started a little before that, I guess.
Right.
And you play football and you won a championship. And that I find pretty amazing because some people start at a young age and they play a sport, but I guess you took to it. You were very athletic
Yeah, well,
and you took to it,
right. I played baseball. I
which was
was,
your main sport.
yeah, and I ran uh, as a kid in school and so on, won a lot of medals in track. And so I had the speed, which helped in baseball.
Right.
And
Now I want to talk a little about baseball. You told me that you were selected by other players
Mhm.
as the MVP of a particular league,
Right.
and you got to go on Happy Felt As Not Whole Gang,
Right.
which was with the Brooklyn Dodgers.
By the way, that was around 1952.
Okay, so you're about 15.
Right.
Okay,
Right. At that time.
and
Yeah.
what position were you playing at that time?
Third base.
Right. So the players got together, they voted. You were
Mhm.
the MVP, and you got to go on that show. Just tell us briefly what was Happy Felt As Not Whole Gang.
Okay. Happy Felton's Not Whole Gang was a post game. The Brooklyn Dodgers playing in Ebbets Field. Uh, this was the post game. After TV, they were on Channel 9. And then after the game, out in right field, whatever player from the team was selected to be the celebrity
Mhm.
at the interview or whatever was there, and I happened to have drawn Carl
Carl
Furillo,
I remember you
right?
said that.
So I was in full uniform, had my baseball glove and everything. We were sitting close to the stands out in deep right field. And so from there, I went onto the field and had a catch with Carl Furillo.
And they gave you a baseball that disappeared from your house
Yeah.
that was signed by all the
Yeah.
Brooklyn Dodgers,
Brooklyn Dodgers,
including umpire Tom Gorman.
That's right.
I don't
How do
forget
you
those
remember
things.
that?
Tom Gorman signed it,
Holy
and that ball be
mackerel.
worth a lot of money.
Mm.
Whoever took it, return it. But that would have been worth a lot of money.
Right.
Gil Hodges, Carl Furillo,
Yeah.
Jackie Robinson.
Right.
So
Right.
that was about 15. Now, you met, I think on more than one occasion, you encountered Jackie Robinson.
Right.
Now, when you were on Happy Felt As Not Whole Gang, did you get to meet any of the other players, or they were just on the field?
No. But they were closer. I was.
In right
I
field?
walked in front of the dugout, and the players were there. Waiting for us to finish up to go out on the field to play ball.
Okay.
So I was within 10, 15 feet
Okay.
of them.
So tell us how you met Jackie Robinson.
Okay, Jackie Robinson I met while I worked in the Queensboro Public Library, and the library was above the Paumanok Community Center. That was the community where I lived when we moved out to Long Island in Flushing. And so I'm coming down the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
I go out to the front door. I open the front door. And as I open the front door, almost at the same time, Jackie's reaching for the doorknob.
Oh.
And as I open the door, I recognize him. I said, Jackie, what the hell are you doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And he says to me, I'm looking for I'm looking for Doctor. He called him Dr. Sugarman,
Right.
who was the community center director, and a guy who was always after me because he claimed he used to call me Ozzie the ringleader. Everything that went wrong in that center,
You got
he
blamed.
always blamed me.
So, and then you met him. How old are you when you met him? What year would that have been?
Let's see. I would say very early 50s.
Okay, so they hadn't. All right, so they hadn't won the World Series yet.
No, that was long
Yeah.
before then. Yeah.
Okay, so but Jackie obviously was on the team, and
Yeah.
he had been Rookie of the Year. So how did let's say your baseball playing days? How did that have an impact on you? Because you didn't get to play in high school because you guess
No.
you had to work.
Yeah. Baseball, like I say, I got to be pretty good. Actually, from the time that I used to play on the street, we played stoop ball, stick ball, which I was also pretty good at, and there was a group of friends within a small area of the block, 106th Street, where I lived. There was myself. That we were younger, and we were pretty much in the same grade.
Right.
A kid named Willie Ayers,
Mhm.
Frankie, Richie, and anyway, we were young, but we could match up with the big guys. Okay, and as youngsters, we had our own team against the big guys in stickball, and we used to beat them most of the
Wow.
time. And we played for money, so they were always after us, trying to beat us. And most times we beat them.
Did your mother know you were gambling? Now, so you played that, and you said that your high school coach was always trying to get you. The high school baseball coach, I should say,
Right,
was
right.
always trying to get you to play.
Right. Well, I played in the CYO, and during the summer, playing in the CYO and so on, I played with a lot of guys from the neighborhood. There was a team in Yorkville, which is a little bit down from where I lived, and on the west side they had other teams. So a lot of guys knew of me as a ball player.
So what was the
So-
coach trying to do?
Yeah. So when the coach, set up his team the first year I got there, a lot of players told him, try to get Ozzie on the team. So the coach would come to my classroom where I was, ask the teacher if he could sit in the back with me, and for a few moments, the teacher would let him. He would come
She
back.
was trying to strong arm you.
Yeah, right. He tried every year for the 3 years that
How
I
come you
went to
didn't
high
play?
school.
How come?
Oh, and I told him, because he really tried hard. I says, Coach, I have to work.
Hmm.
It's a little
I know, a little emotional.
emotional. I said, Coach, I have to work
Mhm.
to help out the family.
You did what you had to do.
Mhm.
No regrets. Now, you said at one time, I remember Junie, who very good friend
Yeah,
of yours, played
right,
football with you.
right.
His daughter's a crossing guard. I see her just about every day I go to work.
Teresa,
It's pretty funny.
Right.
And you said at one time, Junie's a little older than you, correct?
Junie was a year older
Okay.
than me, yeah.
And you said that you were told by your friends that a bunch of guys in a car were looking
Oh,
for
yes,
you.
that's how I first met him.
Tell us that
Right.
story.
It was a Saturday, and
It's a great story.
I had walked down to the there was I guess a breakfast nook or something like that. I had gone down there. I don't even remember what for. And then as I'm walking back to my area where I lived, uh, a couple of guys run up to me. Ozzie, there's a car full of guys looking around for you. He says, are you in any trouble? You need any help? I said, no, I can't imagine why they would be looking for me. Finally, I kept walking home, and a car from across the street, the windows open up, and guys are yelling, hey, Ozzie, hold up. And they went around the block, turned around, and came back and spoke to me. And the kid that, Junie, was
Junie
Junie Meyer, yeah,
I've known him
was the
since I was
guy
a little
that
boy.
spoke to me. He says, Ozzie, he says, we're putting together a baseball team up in College Point, and we'd like you to be on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, sure. And at the time, I couldn't drive, and because they were a little older than me, and at least one or two of the guys could drive. He says, yeah, well, come pick you up, take you to the games, and bring you home.
And that was a lifelong friendship. I
Yeah,
remember I
that's
was there
right.
when he passed away a number of years ago. I remember. See, my memory works funny. I remember he came over one time, and we were in the backyard. And I must have been, I don't even know why I remember this, maybe 3, 4, and you were pitching to me, and I was hitting the heck out of the ball.
Ah,
And
yeah,
Junie
yeah.
was at the
He
house.
was surprised as hell because yeah, I would throw the ball to you, and you were hitting the ball out of our
Yeah.
yard.
So that's how early on in my life, because I
Mhm.
guess, maybe since I was born, because you knew him when you were a teenager.
Yeah.
And then you played football with him.
Hmm.
He was on the team that won the championship
Right.
in 55.
Yeah, the College Point Athletic Club.
Okay. Now, what I also find interesting is you went to Harran High School,
Yes.
and that was in Manhattan, not
Mhm.
too far from Fordham University,
Right.
where I went to law school.
59th and 10th
Right.
Avenue.
And what's amazing is my daughter, Jackie, graduated from John Jay, and that is the same building.
Same exact building.
The thing is, if you went on if someone blindfolded you, brought you on the inside, you would never know it's that. But we took a picture of you, and the fascia or the front of the building was pretty much untouched,
Right.
and
Right.
that was Harran House. So you could see, but if you go inside, it's brand new. There's
Mhm.
escalators and
Yeah, they
elevators.
renovated the whole building.
But I just
After.
find that so amazing
Mhm.
that the high school you went to, my daughter went to college
Right.
and graduated the same
Right.
exact building,
Right.
which also was down the block from Fordham Law School, where I went to law school.
Mm-hmm.
So in that close vicinity, we got educated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, growing up, we're going to get to the Army right
Mm-hmm.
now, but before, you stayed out of trouble, right?
Oh yeah.
you-
No, my mother, because the kids are on my block, even my friends that I told you about, the good ball players, they used to steal from the trucks that came by. For example, the watermelon, during the summer, we were out on the street, of course. And my mother was always on my fifth floor window. She could see the whole block.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the guy started to do anything wrong, I would just turn around, walk back, and sit on my stoop because I knew my mother's watching.
Actually, I think it's Sleepers, where the kids would steal from the hot dog vendor and then they got in trouble.
Yeah.
But and very briefly,
Yeah.
you said
In fact, it's like you've seen the movies. In the old days in the Lower Manhattan,
Mhm.
kids were always stealing from the vendors
like in the mob
that came
movies,
about.
the kids would
Yeah,
start that way and then
exactly.
graduate.
Exactly.
Now, very briefly, because we're about halfway through the show and I want to get to
Oh,
the
my
military now.
God.
See, it goes fast. You were telling me that because your dad had to work and also care for your sisters on weekends, your dad never got to see you play.
No.
I never got to see you. And I
You're
took.
going to make me cry again.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, but and it's to your credit
That
that
was on regret because I got to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And he never saw me.
But he was told. But I remember growing up, I don't think there was ever a game that you missed when I grew up.
Oh,
I don't.
yeah.
I'm saying. I don't think that you coached, and then even when I was in junior high school, college, of course, was different. But missed a game. I remember one time.
Even when you played in men's leagues, I was there.
You were there, and Grandpa,
Yeah, right.
my
right,
maternal grandfather,
right.
and which I thought was amazing. And I remember one time they needed an umpire, and you had snapped your Achilles tendon,
Yes,
and
yes.
you had a full-length cast, and you umpired the game,
Right.
and you still jog down to first base
Right.
to make the call.
I limped over to first
Which
base.
most umpires weren't doing anyway.
Right.
Okay, so now let's get to you graduate high school
Mm-hmm.
and you make a decision to enter the United States Army.
Right.
Now you pushed up your number because you thought
Yes,
you'd be
I
drafted?
pushed up my draft because I had gone to Queens College for a year, and I said, "There's no point in finishing." I said, "Maybe I finish, and they pull me into the Army," and I didn't want that, so I pushed up my draft. I got called shortly thereafter, and went to have my basic at Fort Dix in New Jersey.
Now, you early on, did you decide you wanted to be a paratrooper?
I think so. When I heard about it, I was
So when you first went
intrigued.
into the Army, you didn't know you were going to be a paratrooper?
No,
Okay.
no.
So how did that come about?
Okay, I heard
And
about
your
it.
uniform, one of your jackets,
Oh yes,
can be seen
yeah,
right
that was
behind
my,
him.
that was my dress uniform.
It says Geronimo on there. So, so you hear about becoming a paratrooper,
Right, and I
then
volunteered.
why? Why did you want to jump from a perfectly good airplane?
Because you got extra money.
Oh, okay, that's a good reason
Yeah, you got an extra $55 a month
to risk your life. Okay.
for jumping. Yeah.
with Bidenomics, it's probably like 2 cents. But anyway, it was money, extra money,
Right.
and but you also had to know the history because like in World War II, I know this was after the storied 101st Airborne on D-Day and all the
Well, that I learned
battles.
once I got into the airborne, we would have sessions where we would learn about the airborne, the history,
Right.
the
They're big on like when I went to boot
parachuting
camp. They're big
over
on that.
over Normandy and everything else, and watch movies of it and so
Right.
forth. They wanted you to know the history of your
Sure.
outfit.
And the other day you called me up and you said about the gliders, the first
Oh
troops
gosh,
that got
yeah,
into
yeah.
Normandy before Overlord,
Yeah.
before the big invasion, which
Yeah.
is very interesting.
I'll
But
tell you, gliders. I'm glad when I
oh my
went
God,
in, they didn't have gliders
they're
anymore.
like balsam wood.
I think they were just used as
Yeah, they were like a death trap.
a necessity in Europe. And in fact, I read something recently. The reason they use gliders is because they could surprise
Yeah, it
the
was quiet.
Germans.
You
yeah,
didn't have an engine.
they were exactly.
hmm So that was it. I don't know if Danny has any of the pictures up, but you have a picture you showed me. In fact, I think Christmas might have been the first time I saw that. Maybe I saw it before, but
Hmm.
you said the two guys below you got tangled.
Oh yes.
Tell us briefly about
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah, I jump out, and after my parachute, because when you jump out, the first thing you want to do is look up and check to see that
Canopy's open.
the parachute.
Right.
And when you do that, we used to say that's the most beautiful sight in the world. You see a complete circle, your parachute.
You know you're
then
okay.
you know you're okay.
You might get shot before you hit the ground,
Yeah,
but that was
yeah.
battle.
Because sometimes in jumping, a line would go over the top, and then you would have two bubbles, but then your descent rate was greater, and the chances are you were going to break a leg or both legs or break something.
So these two guys get tangled below you.
Yeah.
In fact, it's in the picture.
And as soon as I saw this, I started slipping.
Watch it.
The parachute, if you tilt it one way and air spills out, there's a principle where you would go opposite to where the air. You could steer because we're up high
So what were you
enough.
trying to do? Get closer to them?
I wanted to stay up with them, which I did. I kept up with them because I knew those guys are in trouble. One of them, pardon?
Was that risking your life for that? In that moment while you were maintaining...
Were you risking your life by getting
No.
close? No.
No, I'm coming down
They were
and
in
I'm
trouble, you
following
weren't.
him. Yeah, I was just following him, and sure enough, they hit first because they were slightly below me. And I saw the landing. I was, very close to it. The one parachutist comes down, and the thing that impressed me was this guy did a great PLF, parachute landing floor, where you put your legs in a certain way,
And you roll?
hit and you roll.
You showed that to
and
me.
you come up standing.
I think I
And-
used that when I fell off a bike once.
And this guy does a beautiful parachute landing fall. And within a second later, this guy comes in, wham,
So one got badly hurt.
right on top of him. Yeah, he was badly hurt. The screams are incredible. So I got, we landed. I took off my
Mhm.
chute. I ran over to see if there's anything I could do, but they were tangled. And if I tried to move them,
You
the
couldn't.
guy would scream bloody murder. So I just started yelling, medic, medic.
Right.
And finally, when
Someone
the medic
came over.
came,
Right.
I left.
Now you got tangled up one time, right?
Uh, no, I don't
I thought you
recall.
told me a story. You got tangled and you had to pull your reserve chute. You remember that?
No,
Okay.
no, I never had to do that. Thank God. That's one of the things you didn't want to, because you have a parachute right under your face. And when you pull that ripcord, there's a good chance that in spilling out,
Oh. Okay.
that parachute will go right up against your face. You'll get a terrific
Mhm.
friction burn
Almost like an airbag.
on your. Yeah,
Mhm.
that thing, and you're talking about a big chunk of cloth.
Now I want to get to your connection to the 1980 Olympics, but first I want to give you the chance to tell us how you got revenge on. You said your sergeant.
Oh yes, my
Yeah.
first sergeant. Uh, I was always good at electronics. I had gone to Harran High School,
Which is not a skill
was
that I
a
have.
vocational, and I took radio and electronics. So when I got assigned to the platoon I was going to be with, Echo Company of 101st Airborne Division, I was a rifleman. I was assigned as a rifleman. So I didn't like a rifleman. We had to carry the rifle and so on and so forth. And I really wanted to get into radio and communications. So nearby there was a commo company, communications company. I found a way to get there during the day and asked the first sergeant if I could be of help to them. I told him about my electronics and radio experience, and he says, "Yeah, you'd be good." So I left, went back to my barracks. I no sooner get into my barracks and the squawk box, the loudspeaker.
Yeah, but you didn't say first. Wasn't you working with a general that said?
Oh
you were...
no, that's later on.
Oh, okay, that was a good.
That's how I got my revenge.
Okay, so
later on.
get
Yeah.
to quick because we got to talk about the Olympics.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, I had to report to the first sergeant, and he didn't like the idea of me going behind his back, and he assigned me to KP, permanent
Kitchen
KP.
police.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So after
Kitchen police.
after retreat, I was supposed to report to the mess hall, to the mess sergeant, and he would put me to work. Now, the mess sergeant, I found out pretty quickly that the mess sergeant and the first sergeant were in cahoots.
Cahoots.
They were really giving me the business. They assigned me to clean grease traps, which is the worst KP duty you could have. So I did it for about 4 days straight. And then after that, I said, "The hell with this. I'm not doing it anymore." And after retreat, I would, instead of going into barracks, I would skirt the barracks and go to the main part of the area, the PX and so on, until it was time to come back and go to bed. So after a while, the first sergeant found out that I was, skipping. He calls me into his office and he says, "Didn't I order you to report to the, for KP after duty?" I said, "Yes, you did, Sergeant." And I'm standing tall and
Right.
at anyway, standing tall, which is the word we used to use. And I said, "Yes, Sergeant." He says to me, "Why didn't you report?" I said, "Sergeant, I reported to KP for 4 straight days. And after that, I knew you and the first and the mess sergeant were in cahoots and were really giving me the business. So I decided not to go anymore." And he blew up, threw a tantrum. And then when he quieted down, I said, "Sergeant," now this was a big sergeant, his last name was Blum, Sergeant Blum from uh, so, by from West Virginia. That's how he prided himself. Uh, so I looked him straight in the eye and I said, Sergeant, if you want me to report to KP, after today, I said, I'll have no choice but immediately go to the IG, the post IG, which was the Inspector General, and they would investigate things and so on. And he looked at me, his face, the hatred in that face, I never saw it like that. Anyway, there was nothing he could really say. Then he told me, get out of my office, my orderly room. So I walked out, went back upstairs, waited for something to happen. Nothing ever happened. So, life just went on as normal. But he didn't want to mess with
But
the
we got to get
IG.
to the story quick. So that you were driving or you were working for a general?
Oh, yes, working for the general was after I left that a few months after, I had to run in with the first sergeant. Word came down from the higher authority assigning me to to the platoon, the communications platoon, just what I always wanted, because my electrical scores in the battery of tests that you take were very, very high. My knowledge of electronics and radio. So I got into where I wanted to be in the communications. There came a time when they sent two companies, I think it was Bravo Company and Delta Company, down to Fort Stewart, Georgia, to do tank and infantry tactics. And I was sent along with a colonel to act as the driver for the colonel and to run the communications. And Echo Company, being one of the companies that went, when I got there before the exercise started, the colonel asked me, who do you want to bunk with? I said, Echo Company, I know the guys. So he says, okay. He says to me, go to Echo Company, tell the first sergeant that I authorize you to stay in his, area, in his barracks. And I did that. And when I got there, I could see a smile on the sergeant. I'm going to get you now, And so, but he never did. What happened was the first day, the first morning, reveille sounds. And at reveille, you got to get ready for the day. Everybody has to be dressed. And out on the company street, they take attendance and so on, all present and accounted for, sir. The guy that I was in the group with, he says, one man in the barracks, sir, to the first sergeant who was, leading this whole formation. And the first sergeant, who is it? And when he heard the name Jusino,
It's like the Shawshank Redemption. When
Yeah.
where's Dufresne?
He came right to my bunk. Now everybody could hear it. This was in the company area, the company street. Says, Jusino, get the F out of that bunk and out on formation. I had the blanket over my head, and I picked it. I remember I picked it out, and I said, Sergeant, if you want me to make your formation, I said, you got to tell the colonel. I said, I got strict orders from my first sergeant back in Campbell that I am to take orders only from the colonel. So you want me out there, you tell the colonel will tell me to get out there. In the meanwhile, I want to go back to sleep. And I put the blanket over my head.
It's like from a movie, right?
Yeah, it was like something like you might see in From Here to Eternity.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Sinatra.
The man was like livid, but he couldn't do anything. In fact, he didn't really say anything. He just turned around, walked back to the where he had the formation. He was attending to the formation, and left me alone in bed.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Now we got to leave the military. Now, in 1980.
People are asking, they want to know the story of how he met grandma.
Oh, how he met grandma. Okay, we're going to get to the Olympics in a second. Give me the short version of how you met
Okay.
grandma, who you
Yeah.
married to for 60 years.
Right. I was on leave from the military, okay, and like I say, the community center that I
Mhm.
worked above the library. Uh, I was there one day, and your mom was there. One of her friends that I knew introduced me to
Did you know her from Facebook?
and
Or
that
no?
was
I'm only kidding.
and that was it.
That's how you met her at the library. And you
Mhm.
married her.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go. The year is 1980, or I guess 79, leading into 80.
Yeah, this was actually in '78.
Oh,
Yeah,
78.
in
Okay. So
'78.
tell us the story about the Olympics. We got about 12, 13 minutes, so
Okay.
give us that
Yeah, I'll give
story.
you the quick version. Uh, uh, I was
Working for New York
working.
Telephone.
Yeah, I was working for the New York Telephone Company, and I, through my experience, I had worked in repair service bureaus and so on. And again, because of my electrical skills and radio skills and so on, I I did the actual work. Uh, uh, I learned everything about the system, which interested me, always interested
Right.
me anyway. And so uh,
Caller ID.
yeah, uh, uh, the job asked me to go up to Albany and give a presentation on our newest
Albany or Lake Placid?
Albany.
Oh, Albany
Yeah,
first. Okay.
because I was dealing with the state police.
Got it. Okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I went up there to the state police and I told them about this great product that we now have uh, that would enable them to know who, or where rather, a call originated.
Caller
Okay?
ID, which we take
Yeah.
for granted.
Right. Which is today, Enhanced 911.
Mhm.
That's what I was trying to sell, what we have today, Enhanced 911. But a big lieutenant that I was addressing uh, gets up from his chair, reaches into his desk, and he says, Ozzie, he throws a book at me, and it's all about 911, the book that I used to learn about the system. He says, that's no good. He says, that's too costly, and it could probably never be implemented before the Olympics. He says, I need something quick and cheap, and it has to be done so that we can use it at the Winter Olympics. He says, we're going to have a lot of people from all
And
countries.
that would be the
They're not
beginning of
going to be able to
1980.
tell us
Right.
anything. But if we know where they are, we can dispatch a car there.
Right.
So uh, that uh, that was about it. Oh, yes.
But you went up to Lake Placid.
Yeah. Oh, no, Lake Placid was later on. So I told the officer, I said
Mhm.
to him, I have an idea how I can give you what you want. However, I don't think I would be authorized to tell you about it. I can't tell you about it. I'll have to go back, get permission, and then we can talk. So that's what I did. I went back. I spoke to my supervisor. He spoke to the district manager. The district manager spoke to the guy above him, and they finally gave me the word that I could go. Also, I contacted legal because a legal issue.
Okay.
This was a
But let's get
proprietary
to the,
thing
the
only
Olympics.
for the company. Yeah,
Okay.
I called him. I told him yes, I can,
Mhm.
and he says, "Great, we'll buy it." So I started the engineering paperwork in order to get the. I knew the equipment. I had used it before, and I wrote up all of the engineering orders to have Western Electric install that equipment in Rybrook, which was the precinct for the state police that was going to be near Lake Placid. So I had them installed, and when I went there after it was finished, I went up there to visit and see how things were, and the state police were ecstatic. The guy I had gone up to see the first time was there He said, Ozzie, this thing is working it's
Mhm.
working great. He told me about one of the first calls they got. There's a college up there, Paul Smith's College. And every weekend they would call in false reports of emergencies
Right.
all over campus. And since it was reported as an emergency, the police had to respond with the sirens blaring and the lights on their cars. Kids got a kick out of watching them go around.
back and
You know,
forth.
they would report something here and then across campus and so on and so forth. The police were crisscrossing all over. They would get a kick out of that. So he says the first guy that called, the officer, on the control, who answered the phone, says to the guy who was trying to report, he says, hold on a minute. He says, you are in Paul Smith's College, right? And there was silence. He says, look, I know exactly where you are. Your telephone number is such and such and such, and your dorm room is such and such. And he says there was silence on the line, and then click.
And that was the end of it.
Right. And then he says within
The
a
word
couple
got
of
out.
hours, it died down. The next day, nothing. He says the word really got around campus. And
Now,
Uh,
you were given the opportunity to pretty much have carte blanche to go to any of the venues.
yes, yes. And like I say, they were so pleased with it that that lieutenant said to me, Ozzie, he says, for the Olympics, because don't forget, that was finished in about about mid 1979. Okay, we had negotiated in 78, and the equipment and everything was installed and ready. I think it was June of 79. So we had a length of time
Mhm.
to get used to it. So he says, when the Olympics come, he says, I'm going to have a special pass for you that will enable you to go anywhere on in the Olympic Village,
Right.
in the Olympic area, as a guest of the state police. And I said, great. Only problem was I never went to the Olympics, and so I missed the Miracle on Ice. One of my regrets,
Right.
you know,
Could have
that
been there. Who knew?
I never
Who knew
got
we'd beat?
there.
Who knew we'd beat Russia? And,
Yeah.
and then go on to win the
Wait,
gold
was
medal.
that ever a thought? Did you think it was possible that we could have beaten them?
No, no.
I still
That's-
remember. I still remember where I was. I was walking out because people always say, I watched the game. Baloney. Unless you were in Canada or maybe Europe, the Russian game was not televised live. The gold medal game was, but that wasn't the gold medal game.
Oh.
So I walked out of a movie theater and someone said, "Oh, USA beat Russia," and I was like, "No way,"
Mm.
because they had lost 10-3 2 weeks before at the Garden. So who you think you're gonna go on and beat them? But anyway,
Yeah.
but you should have stayed up there, but you came back. And,
I know,
yeah.
I know. I've regretted that every day, especially since with you and Lisa and so on, and the grandkids.
You should have brought me
getting
up
into
there. I would
hockey.
have missed school for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I remember talking about hockey. You and I and Larry Ross,
Mhm.
best buddy, who is now a doctor. He lives upstate. We were together when the Islanders
Mm-hmm.
beat the Flyers. Remember that? We were
Yeah.
downstairs watching TV.
Yes,
and
yes.
Nystrom from Tonelli at 7-11 of overtime
Mm.
scored the game-winning goal. But who Barbara Williams was the skating instructor. She was on my show a few weeks ago, and she said Bobby Nystrom, right after the game, he walked on the cement because she was where she was standing, and he gave her a hug. And we were all jumping up together. I remember being with you at my ex-girlfriend's house when the Mets won
That's
Game 6,
right.
and
That's
you
right.
always had faith. I was like, they're gonna lose, and then all of a sudden, that ball goes under Buckner's legs, and then the Mets go on to win Game 6, and then win 7. And I still remember you saying they could do it. I'm like, I don't think so. I jumped
Well, I
so
was
high.
always a big optimist.
You were.
Always.
Right. Now let me ask you a question. You've always been very, very patriotic, like me.
Yeah.
And I remember, I want to tell this story because it really puts it in perspective. We went to, I think it was the first game you and I ever went to at Citi Field,
Mm-hmm.
the old Citi Field. We went to
Mhm.
Shea, but not Citi Field. And there's a place where you buy food, and it's indoors
Mm-hmm.
at the
Right.
ballpark. And I remember I'm ordering ice cream, or like George Costanza in that
Mhm.
episode where he's getting the ice cream on his face. I'm ordering ice cream, and the national anthem starts playing, but I don't even really hear it. You do, and all of a sudden you nudge me at that moment because you were standing at attention.
Mhm.
And I remember going to games. That was even before, because a lot of people don't remember this. You didn't way back when you didn't put your hand on your heart for the national anthem. You did it for the pledge. For the national anthem, you stood at attention like a
Attention, yeah.
soldier.
Right.
So I remember that growing up. Where people would be like yelling, "Let's go Mets!" and you took it very seriously. Why are you such a patriot?
I don't know. I'll tell you a funny story about that. Even when I was a kid, uh, at a very, very early age, uh, I was a Republican. I don't know why. I always mistrusted, for some reason, in my
We'll get into
mind,
politics
I
now.
always mistrusted the Democratic
Even as a
Party
kid.
and their way, of doing things. And now this is how I was a kid. My parents were Democrats, and I used to work on my mother many, many years in the time. And like I say, I must
That's
have been
funny.
around maybe 15, 16 years old. And I always worked on my mother. Finally,
Like Michael Keaton, he was a
Yeah.
Republican. His parents were
finally,
Democrats.
many years later, my parents were able to buy their house in Elmont. And I was still working on my mom to convert her to Republican. When she bought the house and she understood things
She
like
became a Republican.
mortgage, right, having a representative that you can go and complain to and maybe have something do. I remember the guy was, uh, I forget the politician's name, but she became very well acquainted with him and enamored with him because she could go to him and
Complain.
listen to
Mhm.
her troubles and so on, and she finally
Right.
became
And I want to say,
a Republican.
and I think it was 1966, you bought a house in Smithtown with Mom.
Oh yes.
And I was 2. Lisa wasn't born yet.
Mm-hmm.
So coming, I guess, in a sense, from humble beginnings in Puerto Rico, you come here, you stay out of trouble. That's the blueprint for the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
Work hard, stay out of trouble, educate yourself, learn a trade or whatever the case
Mhm.
might be. You bought the house. My sister and I got to go to Smithtown West, great school. We become attorneys, and you're one of my paralegals for many, many years. And too often I hear people say, in America, the deck is stacked against, let's say, minorities,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be black, Hispanic, or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you came here from Puerto Rico, and, maybe in your lifetime you felt the sting of prejudice at some
Yeah.
point in your life,
Yeah.
but it didn't deter you. Did you always
No.
think when you came here, it was up to you to make it or not?
Right, yeah. And that's why I always, like I say, always positive thinking.
Right.
I never, uh, I guess you could say, bowed down to anyone. I always treated people as
Right, you
equals.
still do.
And I got that same treatment back. I never in my life had a problem with me being Puerto Rican and somebody not,
Right.
not liking it or something like that. Maybe they did, but they never showed it.
Right.
To me, I always treated them as equals, and I got treated the same way.
Now, remember I said how quickly that hour would go?
I can't believe it.
We have more to cover, but we may have to do
People requesting part 2 already.
we're gonna have to do a part 2. But in summation, like as an attorney, I'm doing my closing statement. I want to say that my dad has what I guess I'll look at the middle camera, or should I look at the other camera?
Mhm.
The greatest impact, and my mom. So it's a team, and you always hear when kids fail, or let's say in the inner cities or the poor neighborhoods, it's many times there's no father there, and that is a big, big problem in a lot of these inner cities and these poor communities, even in the
Mhm.
rich communities, that there's not a father there. I had somebody in my life, and a mother. So it was a team that was always there for me. Like my dad said, positive attitude. He's even more positive than me. Even when I had my doubts about Trump, he was like, no. In fact, I wish I had more time. He's a Trump supporter. He feels he's the only guy that can get the job
The
done.
only guy.
Right.
Yep.
And just very quickly, there was a MASH episode, and I never forgot this. There was a MASH episode, and the character Winchester was opining with Hawkeye. I guess one of their fathers had passed away. And Winchester, very solemn, he said, I had a father where you had a dad. And that's the difference. People can have a biological father, but to have a dad, someone to be there, coaching, or whatever you get into, I don't care if it's you play the drums or the violin, just to be there for you, to make you feel important, to take care of you. Those things, you can't. I can't say enough for my dad. Thank you very much. But listen, I want to thank you for watching. I'm going to bring him on again, maybe after the primaries, before the general election. We'll see who Trump is running against, if it's Biden or not. And I really want to do a little politics because my dad has a great perspective on things, similar to me. But again, he's been around a lot longer, seen a lot more than I have, and he supports Trump. So if you're out there and say this MAGA crowd is crazy, look at my dad. Right? He's not a crazy guy. I'll put him up against anybody, and he supports Donald Trump. Might not agree with everything the guy says or does, but he supports him. Listen, I want to thank you for your support, for watching this show. My producer, Dan Jusino, did another great job. Dad, thank you for watching.
And
my audience.
Good night to all.
And I wish my little thing had to get reset, so I couldn't answer all your questions. But thanks for watching. You have a great weekend.